In June 2009, a 50-year-old nurse named Ann Mitchell sat in a small hospital in Kermit, Texas, and was arrested. She had spent 23 years at that hospital. She had never been in trouble. She was not accused of stealing money, hurting a patient, or breaking any rule of her profession. She was charged with a third-degree felony called misuse of official information. The maximum sentence was 10 years in prison. Her actual crime was this. 7 weeks earlier, she had sent an unsigned letter to the Texas Medical Board, reporting that a doctor at her hospital was practicing medicine in ways she believed were dangerous to patients. That is not a crime. In Texas, it is a legal duty. Nurses are required by law to report exactly this kind of concern to the state licensing board that exists specifically to receive it. She did exactly what her job, her license, and the law required her to do. The sheriff of her county had a felony arrest warrant ready for her within 7 weeks. This is her story, and it is the story of how an entire small town conspired to punish a woman for following the law. Kermit, Texas, sits in Winkler County, near the New Mexico border, in one of the most isolated corners of the state. Winkler County Memorial Hospital is a 25-bed facility, the kind of hospital where everybody on staff has known each other for decades, and where the local sheriff is as likely to be a patient as a law enforcement officer. Ann Mitchell had worked there since 1986. By 2009, she was the hospital's compliance officer, responsible for monitoring patient safety and quality of care. Her colleague, Vicalyn Gall, had worked there nearly as long, overseeing quality improvement. In 2008, a doctor named Rolando Arafiles joined the hospital's staff. Mitchell and Gall, in their role overseeing patient care quality, began noticing patterns that concerned them. Arafiles was emailing patients he had seen at the hospital's clinic, encouraging them to purchase herbal supplements he personally sold through an outside business. He was changing long-term medication regimens for patients, including thyroid medications people had stably taken for years, without properly monitoring whether the new prescriptions were working. He prescribed powerful thyroid-stimulating drugs to patients who had come in for routine complaints like sinus infections. He had also brought hospital supplies to a patient's home to perform a medical procedure there, outside the hospital entirely. Mitchell and Gall reported these concerns internally first, to the hospital's administration. Nothing happened. So, on April 7, 2009, following the exact process Texas law lays out for situations like this, they sent an unsigned letter to the Texas Medical Board. The letter detailed their concerns about Arafiles' care of several patients, identified only by case number, not by name. They specifically asked that their identities be kept confidential, because they were afraid, correctly, as it turned out, of what might happen if they were not. The Texas Medical Board contacted Arafiles to inform him a complaint had been filed, as procedure requires. Arafiles did not respond by addressing the patient care concerns. He went to his close friend, the Winkler County Sheriff, Robert Roberts. Here is where this story stops being a simple medical board complaint and becomes something far more disturbing. Sheriff Roberts was not a neutral law enforcement officer reviewing a tip. He was a patient of Dr. Arafiles, who credited the doctor with saving his life after a heart attack. He was also, according to testimony that later came out at trial, a business partner of Arafiles, selling the same herbal supplements through a multi-level marketing program called Zuri, recruiting other sellers at meetings held at the local Pizza Hut. The medical board sent Roberts a copy of the complaint, on the understanding that it would be used only to investigate possible criminal conduct by Arafiles himself. Roberts used it instead to identify who had written it. The hospital was small enough, and the details specific enough, that it did not take much work. Roberts obtained search warrants for Mitchell's and Galley's work computers. On one of them, investigators found a copy of the letter sent to the medical board. Roberts had his answer. Winkler County Memorial Hospital terminated both nurses. Within days, Roberts took the case to the county prosecutor, and Mitchell and Gall were indicted on felony charges of misuse of official information, carrying a possible sentence of up to 10 years in prison. The prosecutor who took the case to trial was Scott Tidwell. Tidwell was not simply the county attorney doing his job. He was a political supporter of Sheriff Roberts and, separately, the personal attorney for Dr. Araphiles, the very physician whose conduct the nurses had reported. The man prosecuting Ann Mitchell for reporting a doctor was that same doctor's own lawyer. Charges against Gall were dropped before trial. Mitchell's case went forward. Word of the prosecution spread through the nursing profession nationally, fast. The Texas Nurses Association and the American Nurses Association both publicly condemned the charges, warning that if Mitchell were convicted, it would have what one official called a significant chilling effect on healthcare workers reporting unsafe care anywhere in the country. Nurses around the country, many of whom had never met Ann Mitchell, donated more than $45,000 to fund her legal defense, because they understood exactly what was at stake. If a nurse could go to prison for doing precisely what her license legally obligated her to do, then no nurse anywhere would ever feel safe reporting unsafe care again. The trial took place in February 2010 in nearby Andrews County. It lasted 4 days. One moment from the trial became widely reported afterward. On the stand, Dr. Araphiles, defending his own medical judgment, testified that diabetic patients heal from wounds just as well as patients without diabetes, a claim directly contradicted by basic, well-established medical fact. Witnesses in the courtroom said the audience audibly gasped, and the judge had to admonish them to stay quiet. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Not guilty. Witnesses said that after the verdict, every single juror individually approached Ann Mitchell and hugged her. The jury foreman later said publicly that he could not understand why the case had ever been brought to trial in the first place. "I was just doing my job," Mitchell told reporters afterward. "But no one should have to go through this. I would say to every nurse, if you witness bad care, you have a duty to your patient to report it, no matter the personal ramifications." She had been right about the law. She had been right about her duty. A jury took less than 60 minutes to agree. But an acquittal does not undo 7 weeks of facing 10 years in prison. It does not undo losing your job after 23 years. Neither Mitchell nor Gall were able to find comparable work in their field again after being fired and publicly prosecuted, according to their later civil lawsuit. Here is what makes this story different from almost every other case on this channel. This time, the people responsible did not simply settle a financial penalty and walk away unscathed. Mitchell and Gall filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the hospital, the county, Sheriff Roberts, Prosecutor Tidwell, Hospital Administrator Stan Wiley, and Dr. Araphiles himself, alleging malicious prosecution and violation of their right to free speech. The case settled for $750,000, split between the two nurses. But separately, Texas state prosecutors pursued criminal charges against every person who had participated in retaliating against the nurses. In March 2011, Hospital Administrator Stan Wiley pleaded guilty to abuse of official capacity. He was sentenced to 30 days in jail. In June 2011, a jury in Midland County convicted Sheriff Robert Roberts of 2 counts of misuse of official information, 2 counts of retaliation, and 2 counts of official oppression. He was sentenced to 100 days in jail, 4 years of felony probation, and a $6,000 fine. The conviction automatically removed him from office and forced him to surrender his peace officer's license, ending a 20-year career in law enforcement. In October 2011, Prosecutor Scott Tidwell was convicted on similar charges. He was sentenced to 120 days in jail and 10 years of probation. His trial also publicly revealed a previously hidden 2004 guilty plea for soliciting a prostitute. And on November 7, 2011, Dr. Rolando Araphiles himself pleaded guilty to 1 count each of misuse of official information and retaliation. He was sentenced to 100 days in jail and 4 years of probation, and was ordered to fully surrender his Texas medical license. The doctor, the sheriff, the county attorney, and the hospital administrator, all 4 men who had conspired to turn a routine patient safety report into a felony prosecution, carrying a possible 10-year sentence. All 4 were eventually convicted. All 4 served jail time. All 4 lost their positions. This is one of the only cases on this entire channel where every single person responsible for the retaliation actually faced real consequences. It happened because Ann Mitchell refused to back down, because the nursing profession nationally refused to let her case disappear quietly into a rural Texas courthouse, and because, eventually, the Texas Attorney General's office took the unusual step of pursuing the men who had abused their power, rather than letting the matter end with one acquittal. In the years since, Texas amended its whistleblower laws specifically in response to this case, adding protections against precisely the kind of prosecutorial retaliation Mitchell and Galley experienced. The Texas Medical Board itself changed its own procedures, no longer investigating anonymous complaints in the same way, partly to prevent the exact identification process that exposed Mitchell and Gall in the first place. If this case made you think twice about what it actually costs a person to do the right thing, even when the law is entirely on their side, subscribe to Dark Verdict. Because Ann Mitchell's story proves something most of the cases on this channel cannot. Sometimes the system can be made to work. It simply should never require this much fighting, this much national attention, and this much personal cost for a nurse to be allowed to do her job. Ann Mitchell followed the law exactly as it was written. For that, she was arrested, fired, and threatened with 10 years in prison. The men who did that to her eventually wore the same orange jumpsuits they had tried to put her in. If this story made you think differently about what it actually takes to hold power accountable, subscribe to Dark Verdict. Every case here is documented and sourced. And if you want to see what happens when accountability never arrives at all, the Vioxx case with Dr. David Graham is on this channel right now.